Good morning, and welcome to JSON Web Tokens. Let's see what they are. Of course, we're going to talk about tokens in general, but specializing in JSON Web Tokens. And this is JSON as in JavaScript object notation, the one that you know and love from JavaScript, right? So what is this about? Well, let's take a quick look right here at the content. Probably a good idea of looking at the project, see what's going on there. Authentication 2. And what you'll be required to do is basically the same thing that we did yesterday, only that instead of using sessions, you will be using JSON Web Tokens instead. You can ignore this part 1 and 2. I think will be okay if you can get to the whole thing, but you are expected to do the server side today, and on the second day, which is tomorrow, work on the client. So this project has both the server and the client. So consider this a two-day project, okay? But it's okay if you do them both today, you get to practice more and go beyond tomorrow. So create React app for tomorrow. Today, the same endpoints, only that you're gonna change those to use JSON Web Tokens instead. Cool? Questions about the project? Right. All right, so JSON Web Tokens, and this conversation is just documentation that I'm going to show you. But instead of going through the readings here, I'm going to show you this website. The link is there on Training Kit, where they do a really cool explanation of what they work and the anatomy of one. You can see some of those links, and also this site right there. If you click that link, it's going to take you to this site over here. And you're like, wow, we're not talking about code, Luis. Yes, we're not yet. Well, we'll kind of understand what a JSON Web Token is and how it works. This website's pretty good. They are from a company that provides authentication as a service called Auth0 or Auth0. I don't know the right way of pronouncing that. But they have a few things here, like for instance, this introduction. If you click on that introduction at the top, it's a good explanation of how JSON Web Tokens work, okay? When to use them and all that. The libraries is if you're looking for a nice library to work with JSON Web Tokens, either in Node or any other libraries, they do have a list of a lot of libraries that you can use here when you click on this library. And you could filter this, let's say, .NET. Well, click on that, and they'll tell you whether they have libraries for .NET. And apparently they have 3 libraries for .NET. Okay. So depending on what you're doing with .NET and JSON Web Tokens, they have different libraries. And you see they have implementation of some things, so that are complete, incomplete. Of course, we're looking at Node, so we are going to use the one that says Node. If I can find it, Node.js, here we go. This is the one that we're gonna be using, and it's pretty complete. And this company, is the main contributor to that. It's their library, but it's an open source project. So a lot of people work on this. It's been on the development for a long time, so pretty stable. Okay, that's the one that we're gonna use, the one that they provide. So there's a comment there that says, this is one of the cleanest and most delightful documentation I've ever seen, and it's well deserved. This documentation is clean. There's a lot of white space. It's easy to read. You can follow along. Pretty nice. Yeah, it's pretty cool. So take notes, Connects. Yeah, definitely. So we wanna come back here to this debugger, right? You don't have to follow along. I'm just gonna talk through this with you. So the debugger, it's good because ultimately a JSON Web Token sounds like a token is something like really special, but it's only a string. It's just a simple string that is encoded as a base64 URL encode, right? So anything that you could put inside a string could be used as a token. And it makes sense because normally tokens are transmitted from the client back to the server as a header. And you might remember the header What a header does is it gives you a way for you to have a key value pair, but it's everything transmitted over HTTP is going to be a string at the end of the day. So we are transmitting a string, right? So a JSON token is a string that has 3 parts separated by a dot. If you can see the colors in the page, not everybody can, but if you could, you would see that the first version of this, the first part, not version, but the first part of the string is red. The other one is kind of purple in my eyes, and then the other one is kind of green, bluish in my eyes, right? People see colors differently. But they're color-coded here. But what's important is that they're separated by a dot or a period in there, the 3 parts of the string. And they have meaning, right? There's a semantic meaning to each of these string portions, right? The first one is what is called the header. And of course, there is a standard for JSON Web Token. So those 3 letters there, they're not an accident. They are defined in the standard. So this means the first one is the algorithm that it's used. There are different types of algorithms that you can use for this. They're using the HS256, but you could change that if you want to. This is what they use by default. The library that we're going to use, provided by them, uses that by default. Seems to be secure. And then the type is JSON Web Tokens, because you can have different types, right? So this is going to be a JSON Web Token. And then the second portion, and there are others that you could have in there. Funny. So Andrew sees this color as hex code 0071 BC. All right. So the second portion of this is what we call the payload. And of course, they have nice documentation there saying, hey, this is the data. So you remember how in the cookie, we could say, you know, rec that session that and pass some data in there, and that would be held at the server. The data this time is going to travel inside of the token. So all the data that you have in here, this would be kind of just a simple object that has data. Some of these properties, I think the sub and the issued at, they're going to be added by default by the library too. You don't have to worry about them. But this name property right here, that was added manually by whoever prepared that payload. Okay. So the data that you want to store in the token is going to go into the payload of the token. We'll see how to do it using the library. And then the third one is, yeah, so if this token is going to be on the client and people are going to be able to see it, as you'll see, how can we make sure that nobody's touching that token and making changes, maybe adding some extra data to the payload? And the way that this is done is because the third part of the token has what is called a signature. And this is something that the server is going to produce. It's going to take the header and the payload. It's going to be base 64 encoded, and it's going to be added to a secret that the server knows, and it's going to generate that third string out of that. And of course, encode it again as base 64. Locally, the library is going to do that. It's going to, it's going to provide some methods for you to sign the token to generate that signature. So you're going to use the library to generate the token, but know that there are going to be 3 parts in it. And that tokens are, I'm not going to say the most secure method of it, but they are pretty secure because you can't really tamper with them. If you do any changes whatsoever to this, the signature is going to change. So you can pretty much know that if you get a token, you can verify that the token is valid, and you will be able to tell whether someone changed it or not. Okay? The server will know, yeah, I produced this token and nobody has tampered with the token. So 3 parts, the header, the payload. Think of the header as metadata about the token, the payload with the data, and the signature to make sure that nobody has tried to modify the token on the client. So what about that library? Well, the library we're going to use is called JSON Web Token, produced by that company, Auth0. And it's pretty easy to use. It's got a couple of methods that we care about. One of them is how can I sign a token, like generate the token? And then the other one is how can I verify that the token is valid? And of course, there are some options that we need to come back and visit as we generate our token. See, this is how you sign one. And then there's a verify somewhere in there. And this is how you verify the token. Okay. How about some code? What's the name of the project that we were using yesterday? Haha, the Auth1 guided. See if I can find it. Auth1 guided. So let's say open recent. Auth1 guided. Here we go. So I will ask that you go and open that. And if you were not at the same spot that we were yesterday, all you have to do is download that zip that we posted, and you're going to be exactly where I am right now. I'm going to go and install the dependencies. And of course, while we're doing everything inside of index.js, to keep it simple, we'll continue to do that. We have these models, right? The model is for the data access, but the session configuration, all that was happening on the index.js. How's the font size? Small screens, 13 inches. Font size. Good. Okay. All right. So I'm going to stop and ask to make sure that you're ready to go. It's not ready to go. Before I continue, and then we'll write some notes. I'm going to open up a note files in here. There are some differences between handling authentication with tokens and handling authentication with sessions. The main difference, differentness, yeah. I'm kind of, my hands are frozen. Between using sessions and tokens for auth. And again, you're gonna see me do a lot of kind of opinion here, but I think the main difference that we care, at least in our context, is where the data state is kept. Who is responsible for keeping the state? In the case of sessions, keep state where? Who is responsible for keeping the state, the client or the server? Is it in the server or on the server? In the server, okay? When using tokens, and notice how I'm not saying just, but tokens in general. So this would be when using sessions, state is on the server, is kept in the server. When using tokens, state is kept in the token, meaning in the client. The client is to hold on to the state, okay? That's the main difference. And that's gonna affect other things, right? Because that means now the client is responsible for sending that state back to the client on every request. This used to happen automatically when using cookies. When using tokens, though, you have to manually do that on the client. So that is, I think, starting out, that is probably the main difference that we care about right now. So let's talk about some responsibilities. If now the client, I know that the server has some responsibilities and the client has some responsibilities. So who does what? Well, the server is going to be responsible for producing the token. It also needs to send the token to the client. Now, it needs to, on the upcoming request, needs to read, decode, and verify the token, okay? And of course, if we have any data that we care about inside of that token, remember, we used to have data inside the sessions. Now that data is going to be on the, what part of the token is it? Remember that we had 3 parts. What part of the token has the data? The payload, that's correct. So it needs to kind of make the payload available to the rest of the API, okay? So let's say that we have this in some kind of middleware. That middleware is responsible for doing all of this, you know, well, at least when doing the second part of it, like on request coming in, it's got to make that payload data available to the rest of the API. So our job today is learn how to do those things at the server level, okay? Now, the client, though, and that's going to come tomorrow, the client has some responsibilities too, right? You need to store the token somewhere. And the reason for that is because it needs to send the token on every request. If the token is available, right? If you don't have it, well, you're not going to send anything. That means that you're not going to be authorized. But once you have a token, you need to send it on every request to make sure that you establish your identity with the server, okay? And of course, when we do a logout, notice that there is no logout here, okay? I mean, you can implement it. We'll probably talk about that because the question is going to come up. It always comes up. But the logout now is going to happen kind of in the client. So on logout, it's going to destroy the token to make sure that nobody else can go and grab it and use it once you decide that you want to log out. Questions there is about responsibilities on both sides. Let's kind of style this. I mean, this is not a markdown class, but yeah, should be able to close it now. All right, so let's start working down this list, one responsibility at a time, taking breaks in between. Right? So the first one is, yeah, of course, we said that we're going to use that library. Well, we already saw it. We're going to use this JSON web token library. So we need to go and install this. So the first step for me, and don't follow along yet, you'll have time, don't worry. First time for me is, well, actually, we're not going to do it on this. We don't want to change this file. So I'm going to rename this to sessions to know that this is where we did this using sessions, right? That way we could keep like kind of a history of both. Copy this and then generate a brand new index file. Then drop that there. Get your fingers away from your keyboards. Good job. Thanks. So I renamed the sessions, remember the old index file, and then created a brand new one and copy all the content in there. And then we're going to start removing things that we don't care about. Okay. So we don't care about sessions anymore. Removing that. No session store. Removing that. We still care about those. Of course, we don't need the session config anymore. So we're removing all this, including that line that says added this. Of course, there's no session. Get rid of that. And of course, there is going to be some session information in there like this that we don't need anymore. So I'm removing all of that mentions session one way or another. Get rid of that. Same here. How can we do the restrict? I don't know yet. So this is what we're going to do. We're just going to make this just let everybody in. And that way we save some time there. And of course, this is another implementation of this. We can get rid of that. And do we have any more sessions somewhere in there? If we find them, we're just gonna get rid of them. Oh, here we are. So this is the logout. We're not gonna do logout on the server, so done. Special effects, see? All right, so I think we pretty much remove everything related to sessions here. I don't know whether the server still works. Yarn server, let's try that, see if we could get some stuff or some information out of it. Postman, while that loads, oh, that loaded fast. All right, so let's do a get to the users, send that, and we got the users. So server still working. It's the same server is running on 5,000, as you can see right there. Let me close this. Everything is working. Only that even if we don't have the username and the password, everything still works. Okay, we're not doing any authentication at all, right? The protected route is still there, but it's just doing next. It's just bypassing. Let's close this and keep the login open. Cool. So the restricted middleware is just letting everybody in. So let's go and bring in the library. Let me stop there. Make sure that everyone is in the same spot. And we're going to take a shortcut here. I'm going to give you the content of the new index file. Haha. Save some time. So code snippet, boom. This is going to be index.js. Right. So rename your old file, create a new index, and just paste that content in there, and you should be able to run the server after downloading the packages and visit the /API users endpoint. Also, Hank and Leanne still working on it. Thank you. Okay. Keep the questions thread open, please, so you can ask your questions there. Yes, Mark, you were saying? All right, good to go. Right, perfect. So let's go bring in the library. So yarn add, and by let's, I mean I will be bringing the library. You will wait and do it later. Yeah, yarn add JSON web token. I wonder if there's a JSON with an A, like the guy from Friday the 13th. I don't remember his last name. Now, of course, once we have it, we're gonna bring it in up here. If my computer wants to do the right thing. This is Zoom's fault slowing me down. So we're gonna bring in this. We're gonna call it yacht. You could call it whatever you want. JSON web token. The name, this name is not relevant here. Now we have that. Let's see. We say that we need to produce the token first. So let's go work on this one, right? Produce the token. And it's easy because we know we have this sign method. So let's say that when we do the login, which line again? Ah, I forgot now. Which line should we be producing that token? And what's a good place here? What line number? 45? after 45, so 45.5, okay. So 45.5 here, we're gonna add a way to produce the token. So we're gonna call a function. I call mine generate token. It's gonna generate token. Could be generate JWT too, right? I like token better. Generate token. And then we need to pass on data, right? I like to have some data on the payload. In this case, I'm gonna pass, just to make it similar to what we have, we're gonna pass the user to that function, and then we decide what we wanna add as part of the payload, okay? So again, same place that we used to do the sessions, now we're gonna change that to be the token instead. We're gonna generate that token, okay? So we're gonna have this function, generate the token. It's gonna be synchronous, so we don't need to handle then or do promises or async and await or anything. We're just gonna grab it and say, give me a token. I'm gonna grab it in this constant here. When I call this function, it's gonna give me a token back. And now, that should produce a token, right? And then the next step would be, after it's produced, we're gonna have the server send the token to the client. So let's assume that we already have it. We need to go and write this function, of course. Let's assume that we have it, and all we have to do is now attach that token as part of the response. That's it. We're sending back our message, and we're sending back the token in there. So now we took care, almost, of the first two steps right here. Boom. Produce the token and send it back. So let's go write that function there. This function, of course, would be in some kind of auth service or whatever, but we're gonna have it like right here, just to have it together with the code. JRR token. Yeah, makes sense. So the function generate tokens, we said that it's going to take a user, and then we're going to do some stuff with this. And remember, we have three parts to the token, but we're going to go, I like going backwards, right? When doing things that this is the first time that I do this. And I know that ultimately, what I want to do is I want to return the result of calling the library sign method, right? And that's going to take a few arguments. The first one is the payload. The second one is some kind of secret. I don't know what the secret is going to be. And then a set of options for that. So that's the signature of this sign method. You call it, and this is going to give you back a token using the payload, the secret, and the options. Now we need to have that. All right, so what do we want in the payload? Well, let's go and create it. We can make it an object, right? And then have some information in there. Some of the properties on the token have meaning, right? They're defined by the standard. One of them is called the sub. So only that for this library, you write the right name, the whole name for it. So the sub in payload is, let's say, refer. No. What would be the right term for this? Sub in the payload would be what the token is about. Find a nice way of writing this. So if this is about a user, in here, or maybe identifies what the user is, what the token is about, right? So in this case, it's the user. So probably in here as the subject, we want to say this is going to be the user.id. This is a common practice, right? The idea of whatever it is that you're identifying as part of that token. This is going to generate a sub property on the token that is generated. We'll see that later. The library gives you a nice way of saying, no, this is the subject. Type the whole thing. Don't go lazy and do just sub. Okay. Another thing that we can add is any other information that we care about. We could have the whole user in there, but maybe we could just add the username and say this is going to be the username. And you can see how we could have the structure of that. And then any other information that we want would be here, right? This would be any other data that we might want to add to the token. For now, we're just going to use the username and the subject. Use the ID as the subject. Okay? All right, so we have the payload. Now we need the secret, right? So let's go and add a secret somewhere in here. I can tell you right now that this secret, we're going to need it when we do the verifying. So having it inside this function is not a good idea because it's going to be scoped to this function only. So let's bring it out. And what would you do with that secret if you were doing this in production? So I'm going to bring this secret and have it out here, right? What would you do? Probably, very good, you will extract that out into an environment variable. You probably don't want to have that in your code. And we could do that later if we have time, right? So I'm going to call this the secret. And this, actually, let's do a, I don't know if because then we not need to bring the other library, but you know how to do that, so it's good. And then in here, give me a secret. There you go. Is it secret? Is it safe? Right? So now we have the secret, and we can use it there. Right? It's defined. It's going to grab it from the outer scope. This is going to come from the environment probably. And then the options, we're going to create that in here, right? Cons, because this only applies to these options, to the token, to this function. And the options is going to also be an object. There are a lot of options for this. A lot of options. Algorithm by defaults to this. You could change that. Expires. We're going to take this one. We definitely want to have an expiration date for that, right? And they have a nice way of expressing this. You don't have to calculate milliseconds anymore. You could say, 120 milliseconds, but you can also say 2 days, 10 hours, 7 days. It's pretty nice. So let's make it like a day old. So we're going to say expires in, boom, 1 day. No need to be multiplying anything. Okay, I like that secret. I'm going to take that secret. Let's call it many-to-many relationships. A third table for many-to-many relationships. How about that? How about that? Many-to-many relationships are a lie. Cool. Thank you for that awesome secret. All right, so we have an expiration date already. There are more, of course. Again, if you go down the line, you're just gonna see like the JWT ID. This is if you want to give the JWT JWT. JWT ID is awesome. This is gonna turn into what is called a GTI on the token. So if you want to do something, and let's talk about this right now because this is gonna come up. When you're using JSON with tokens, since the state is on the token, it's gonna be living on the client and it's gonna comment on every request. That means that we cannot do a forced logout on the server, right? Because the server doesn't keep a hold of the token. It's not keeping state anywhere. So how do I handle logouts if I want to forcibly inactivate a token? Well, you need to keep a list of all the tokens that you have produced, or you need to keep a list of all the tokens that you want to invalidate. You always need to have the list. The idea here is, do you hold on to tickets, to the tokens, not tickets, but tokens, right? Do you care about whitelisting or blacklisting? If you do a blacklist, not the show, I know some of you watch the blacklist show. It's pretty nice. A blacklist means I'm going to mark every token as good, but then I can blacklist some tokens that I want to invalidate. If I know some token was compromised and I want to just cancel it, I could keep a blacklist with the IDs of the canceled tokens. The other approach is to have a whitelist where you say, every token that's still good, I'm going to have a whitelist, a list of all the tokens that are good. So when I want to invalidate one, you go and delete it from that list. I think, depending on your use case, I want to say that most of the time you're going to have less tokens that you want to cancel. So probably blacklisting is a little more efficient because the list of blacklisted tokens should be smaller. Over time, though, that may change. You may have more blacklisted than whitelisted. So depending on your use case, pick one. So having a JWT ID means that I can now attach the ID of the JWT as this field right here. And remember, nobody can change that. They cannot go and say, I'm going to change the ID of my token so that it's not blacklisted anymore. They can't do that because the signature is going to break. It's going to be different. So the server is going to know that someone touched it and it's going to invalidate it right anyways. So, and of course, there's more like the audience and the issuer, like Lambda School issued this. Okay. For our case, though, we're going to stick to the expiration date. That's good enough for the options. And that should be good enough. Now we have a token that we're producing and we're sending back to the client. Let's go try it out. Let's see if that works. In theory, if I log in now, I should have a response that includes a token. Let's go try it out. And I'm going to log in, bottom here, send that, and buddy, haha, look at that. We got a token right there. So I'm grabbing the token without the quotes. Well, we're not having a cookie anymore, so I'm going to change that to be have a token. Here we go. So let me show you in this tool, I'm going to drop. Notice how this says signature verified down here. This is telling me whether the token is valid or not. I'm going to drop our token. Okay. Paste that. And two things out of notice here. The first one is, since the secret they're using is this is an invalid signature. It's saying, no, I cannot decode this correctly because that's not the secret. The secret goes into this box right here. But the other thing that I want you to notice, all the data that I send to the client, even though I don't have the secret, I can see that data. This is the expiration calculated by the expires in. This is when it expires. This is when it was issued. This is when it expires. And then the subject is 5 because we changed the subject, right? To be the user ID. And Boromir happens to be the 5th user on our table. And the username is Boromir. So the data will always be visible on the token, right? Anybody can go in there, go into the DevTools and grab that token and copy the value of that token key and drop it in here, and they're going to get at the data. So never, ever, ever put sensitive data in there. Only the absolute minimum you need in order to do your work on the server. So if I wanted this to be verified, then I would have to have my correct secret in here, and then it's going to tell me that it's verified. So let's take a break before you come back and try to re-implement this, because we're already at 40 minutes, right? So let's take a 5-minute break, and then we'll be back, and I'm going to let you see the code after we come back from the break so that you can go and implement that. See you in 5. I'm kind of a bully, aren't I? And we are back, right? After that 5-minute break. So your job now is implementing this. There are some changes. I'm going to do a quick review so that you remember all the steps. We install this, right? That's the first step. And we brought it in, we required it. We defined the secret. And then we modified the, we added this function. And then modified the login in here. So this is new, and now return token. Tomen. This, Tomen is one of the sons of Cersei. All right, so left has everything from the top, and then the rest is after line 51. So here we go. On the right, you have the new function and the login. Please let me know when you're done. And of course, you want to test that out. Make sure that Nothing broke on the server, and then you can do a post and go and get your users. And you get the token when you do the login. I use Pass on my database. Oh yeah, you're using that database? Yes, it's Pass. Pass. It would be Boromir Pass. Of course, the real password that he probably will use in production would be one does not simply walk into Mordor. It's a barren land. I know someone is looking for that meme. Gandalf's password could be maybe, you know, on the 5th day, look to the east. Iconic. Oh. See, now I want to go and watch this, The Return of the King extended edition. Too bad I left it in my back in the Dominican Republic. I don't have it here. I bought that when it came out. It was like $80. It was just so good. The extended edition DVD collection. Pretty nice. Yeah, it was like I think the actual content was about 13 hours, but then you had like 7 hours of the production. It's pretty interesting seeing how they made it happen. I mean, a lot of work went into that and how they work with the customs and all that. It's pretty funny seeing Legolas bow break as part, as part of the production. It's pretty nice. I was happy. And I saw the whole thing like nonstop. 13 hours. All right, let's see where we are. We still have 4 people working on it. Yeah, okay. People watching the video, we're just being entertained while everybody else works. Yeah. So your job is, if it's everything is good, you should be able to log in and get a token back. If Aragon has a client-side error, it should be Gimli says, he fell. Oh, man. Aragon's password could be, let's go hunt to some orc, maybe? I don't know. Legolas, what does your elven eye see? All right, so looks like, yeah, we're only missing one person. Do you need help? Oh, no, we're good. Excellent. All right. So now that everybody's on point, right? We have managed to do the first two parts of this. Okay, so let's go see how to read, decode, and verify the token and make the payload available to the rest of the API. Second portion of this. Really cool, right? So now we have it, right? So what would be a good place to do that, though? Oh, not getting a token? Do you want to share your screen? Or do you want to try work with it a little bit? If you want, you can grab the screen share anytime. I'm gonna let the audience now on Slack just drive this debugging. I'm gonna open it so that anybody can unmute and then just choose allow participants to unmute themselves and drive this debugging. Anybody, just jump in there. Let's see you do some debugging magic. I'm gonna get started, but anybody else, please unmute and jump in there. So so show me what you're getting though. Let's go see what you're getting on Postman. You go there, admin and password, and you should probably change the bcrypt rounds to be something like 5 or 6 because it's taking too long. There you go. Even though you need to create a new user now. Let's go and create a new user because the new user is gonna have those smaller rounds. Yeah, good. There you go. Now, oh, you have somebody else named Alex in there already? Maybe. There you go. Perfect. Now let's use Alex123. Ah, all right. So you're getting 500. All right. So who's gonna help me debug this? Okay, man, jump in there. Can I pick someone from the list of participants?
Sure.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yes, pick up. All right. All right. So up and down we go. Padrake. Can I get some help? Oh, you fixed
There was
it.
a typo.
Ah, good job, Padrake. You're off the hook. Good job. You fixed it. I mean, that error just saw that we mentioned Padrake, and he's just like, yeah, no, I'm giving up. He's going to find me. Good job. Thanks for sharing. I know that it feels like you have to be brave in order to share or even trying to troubleshoot online, like in front of everybody. But remember, this is a safe environment. We're all peers. You got to feel like family here. So jump in. Because I know if you were working together next to each other or maybe on a Zoom meeting, only the two of you, you would jump in and try to help. But I know it's stage fright, but feel safe, okay? Feel safe here. All right, so let's go tackle the next step on this. Anybody else before we continue? Oh, is it safe to send the username and the payload, or does it just depend? Well, depends. Depends on your system, really. I mean, we're doing it as an example of adding information to the payload, but depending on your use case, you may decide whether that's safe or not. I think usernames are fine. I think names are fine. Information that the client needs, instead of forcing the client to make another request to get the data from the user ID, if you know that the client still can go and get it anyways, you might as well just send it. So as long as it's not something that is sensitive, like passwords or credit card information or things like you don't want the client to have access to, then those cases you don't want to send, but anything else could be in there. And of course, you want to minimize the amount of information or data that you send there because this is going to travel back and forward on every request. So the heavier it is, the slower your application is going to be. So mind that. Mind the performance too. You're going to get a hit on that. Cool. So my question is, where would be a good place for us to go and do the next couple of steps, which is, let's take the first one, which is read, decode, and verify the token. What would be a good place for that? And it's on screen there. So just pick a line that you think it would be a good idea. While you're picking up that line, I see a question that says, is the token always added to the login request handler? You mean the generation of the token? Depends. In the way that we have it set up here, we're saying we're going to generate the token after we verified this, right? After we verify that the user can log in. You probably want to do that also on the register. Once they register, you give them a token back. And on any other place where you verify an identity, you could send the token back. But the way that we have it set up, this feels like a very good place to do it, here and also on the register. Because the idea is, remember, once you generate the token and you send it back to the client, you don't have to do that again until the token expires, because the client's going to send you back the token every time. So no need to generate it again. And I say there are other places. Let me tell you why, and then we're going to come back. Let me tell you why I say that, because I know that it's like half truth. There may be other places where you also generate a token. And the thing is that you may have more than one. There's normally more than one kind of token on a system, right? So I'm going to say something like common token types, okay? You may have an ID or identity or auth token, and then you may have commonly something called a refresh token. And you may have, and this is going to have different names. Could be access, could be authorization. There are other names for this, like claims, whatever, token, right? And what they mean is this one established identity, and this is the one that you get when you log in and you're telling who you are. But then what if you produce a token and you work, let's say, at a bank, and you don't want the tokens to last more than 10 minutes, just in case, right? More than 10 minutes. So that means that every 10 minutes, the token is going to be invalid. So in those cases, you have another type of token that takes a little longer, called a refresh token, okay? Because the thing is that the auth token, this thing that's going to hold the ID, it's going to help you get the authorization token. So probably want to. This is for the identity. And when you're using a third-party provided, using something like, there's a protocol called OAuth 2, version 2 is the one that we're using now. That is the stuff that you use when you click like signing with Facebook, signing with, Instagram or Google. You're going to get a token with identity information in there after you go through the process, right? And now you can use that to go and request authorization from some API that has the resources. So someone establishes the identity, let's say that is Google, but then your API is going to use that identity to decide whether you're going to give them access or not. So you produce that authentication, or this access or authorization token for them. This could be 10 minutes. So when it expires, because you trust this token implicitly. So you don't have to go back to the database to check the access of the user. Every time it comes in, you trust that the information that's on the token is valid because it hasn't expired. So that means you don't have to be doing database hits every request to go and check for the authorization of the user. So when that token expires every 10 minutes, when the token comes in, you're like, oh, the token expired. You send one message back to the client, and the client needs to send you back. And this is long-lived, perhaps 8 hours, okay? For instance. So maybe when someone logs in the morning, at 9 o'clock in the morning, this token is going to be good until 5 o'clock in the afternoon or something. So maybe 9 hours, that would be, right? With the lunch hour. So what happens is the token expired. Now I send back a message with an error to the client, say, hey, your token expired. So then the client sends back, because it's got both tokens. You get both, the access token and the refresh token. Then the client will send that back to the server. And then the server gets this token back and says, okay, I have your identity in here. I'm going to do another search on the database and assemble a brand new access token for you that will last you another 10 minutes. And of course, I'm exaggerating. This might be an hour, maybe 30 minutes, right? Maybe you don't want to do that every 10 minutes, maybe every 30 to 60 minutes, let's say. So I'm going to give you another access token that I'm going to trust for the next hour, for the next 30 minutes, for the next 15 minutes. So it requires every hour or so in this case, it requires like a back and forth between the client and a hit to the database to produce a brand new access token. But this makes your system a little more secure, because you know that you're now limiting the amount of time that a rogue token might be stolen by someone and be used to access your system. You kind of time boxing that. Yeah, is it a new login request? It's not going to be a new login request. It's going to be a new request as, sending back the refresh token. How does it know it is a refresh token? Well, you can have a property in there that says the type. One is going to be type access. So that means I don't have to check the database for this one. And then another one is going to say type refresh, right? Something that you put on the payload. And the server checks for that and says, is it an access token? Let me read the permissions from there and don't worry about the database. Is it a refresh token? Oh, I need to take the user ID, go to the database, and assemble a brand new access token back and send that back to the client. And of course, if they have access to the resource that they want, you will also give access to the resource and send back a brand new access token. It sounds complicated, but it's not, right? It's pretty simple once you start doing it. The only difference is the expires in and a possible property of type. That's the only difference. And of course, the client has to do some work, right? The client has to know about it and has to know that if you get a particular error, you need to then grab your refresh and send it to get a brand new access token. This is something that is kind of touched on the lecture sometimes, not all the time, right? But know that this exists. There is more than one common type. I just took your question as to say sometimes it's not only on the login that you produce tokens. Sometimes it's you have another endpoint where you're like doing a refresh of your access. Okay, so let's go back to this. Again, my question is where? Okay, I see, let's see. Precious secret. Which line would be a good line for this? 81, yeah, that's excellent, right there. This is where we do the verification, right? Before we call next, we're gonna say, let's verify this. So the method that you call in the library is called verify, and it's gonna take the token, it's gonna take the secret, and then it's gonna take a callback function that is gonna be executed, and that's gonna be one of those error first callback functions. And in that function, you will either get an error, either if the token is invalid, or a decoded token if the token is valid. So let's go write it. I'm gonna make a call to this, remember, and this is also synchronous, this function. So we don't have to worry about promises or anything like that. Only the callback function is the only thing that is gonna be a little bit asynchronous. Now, how does the client send the token? What would be a good header if you were sending authorization information to the client? Correct, that headers, that authorization. Doesn't have to be there, okay? We could tell them, send me a token header, but normally you'll see that the token is sent as part of the authorization header, okay? It could be called banana for sure. So we grab the token from there and we say, do we have one? Do I have a token? Because that might be undefined, right? If I don't have a token, then eventually, I'm gonna call next somewhere in there if everything works. But if I don't have a token, what do I want to send back in this case? What? A status code. Yeah, 401, you're not authorized. And this would be, I don't know who you are. So, and maybe send back a message or something. Here we go. You Balrog. All right, there we go. Now let's go in here. Now we need to verify it, right? We know that we have a token, but is it valid though? Is it valid? Let's go check it out. Say, Judd, will you please verify this token for me? Verify. And here's the token that we got. Here's your secret, the one that we use to produce that token, right? It's coming from the, remember that this is coming from the outer scope because we defined it up here. But it's probably going to be on an environment variable in production, right? Once you do this the right way, not demo code. And then you got this callback function that has either an error if the verification failed for any reason, or you're going to get the decoded token here if the token is valid. So let's go and check if I get an error. Of course, if we don't get an error, go ahead. You can go ahead. And this would be the first step. We're going to keep it here for now. I'm going to come back and add something else because we're missing another piece, right? But then if I have an error, that means that you kind of tampered with the token. So we want to do a couple of things there. Probably we want to record this somewhere, because it's not the same not attaching a token as you sending me a token that you kind of modified. So I cannot verify it. It's wrong. Something went wrong. You probably want to record the event in the database or some logging system, and then you're going to return that bounce back. Say, hey, you're not authorized. Let's go try it out. Let's see if that restricted works now. See if we're missing any step there. So if we go here and go into users, send that, you shall not pass. That's what we expect to see because we're not sending our token. So if we copy our token from here, right? So without the quotes, I'm copying that string and I'm going to attach it as a header. Remember the header up here? And the header is going to be authorization. We have used that before. We're going to place that token there and hit send. Ooh, we have access now, right? So what happens if I kind of touch this somehow and change this to be a T instead of an E? Send that, you shall not pass, right? And actually, let's change the message here, you shall not pass, and to be something like, so that we know that this error is coming because you changed the token. Let's make it. Anybody know who MC Hammer is? Send that, can't touch this, right? So the application knows that you kind of tamper with the token. That back, send this, got the data back. Excellent. We're in business. Your job now is go and implement this. And then once everybody is done, we're due to take another 5-minute break, right? We're almost there. We're almost there. All we're missing now is making the payload available to the rest of the API. Hamza, don't cheat. Delete that. Delete it. Good job. So all the work was here on the decoded, on the restricted middleware. If it error, it could also mean that the token is expired. Yes, anything that makes the token invalid, you're correct. Good question. So when I say the token, the client is going to send the token back, is that in the form of a new login request? Oh, that's the old question. No, it's just a header on every request like we did. think we already answered that. All right, let's do some troubleshooting. Want to stop my share? Your show, sir. Same drill as before. Anybody can just jump in there and help us out. Ah, you might remember we mentioned that cannot set headers after they are sent, right?
This might be due to a if and else statement.
Oh, yeah.
Go to your middleware. Let's see. Wait, what's happening here? No, I don't see anything weird here. Let's see. Next, if else. Do you have any other if else statements that needs to be addressed? No, nothing.
I would see if we can locate the line where the error is happening. Which file and which line is it?
Oh, you have two nexes. That's right. Never mind. You're fine.
Okay.
It'll work now.
Good job. Good job.
That's 2-0 for Leanne right there.
Very nice. Very nice. All right, so now that we're all on that step, before we do the next step, let's go and take another 5 minutes, right? And then we can hit it for the next 30 minutes. So I'll see you in 5. All right, and we're back, right? So let's go and tackle this last portion of it. Make the payload available to the rest of the API. It sounds like something really, really hard to do. Well, let's just do this, right? Right before we call next, what if we say rec.something, and we could call that payload, for instance, equals to that decoded token that we just got. We're not doing anything with it yet. So we could call this payload, we call it whatever we want. Let's call it decoded token. Okay, or decoding JWT. Something. So that means that would be available there. And if it's available there, if I go to /API/users, we have access to this. Okay, we should have access to this. So let's send an object now here just to see it on the response. It's not necessarily what you're gonna do. You're not gonna just send the decoded token back, right? But we're gonna do this now. I'm gonna say the decoded token that we got is on rec.decoded token, decoded JWT, right? This right here. So since this goes to the restrictor first, by the time you get to the endpoint, to the actual endpoint, the route handler, we already have this rec.decoded JWT. So we're gonna send that back as a decoded token to see what it's like, what it looks like on the inside. Keep in mind the stuff that we put on the payload, and that I told you that some of the data on that is going to be added by the library automatically. So when we look at, oh, not this, we're going to go into the users, look for the token. Hey, we saved the server. Is my server saved? What endpoint am I hitting? Oh, I'm in the users, /API/users, this one. All this time, I have been lying to you. It's actually this endpoint. All right, so the decoded token has, remember that I said some of the stuff is going to be there put by the library, like the subject. Well, we added this, the username, but then those two were added automatically by the library. But we have, inside of that decoded token, we have access to everything we put inside of the payload. So is payload the standard command? Yeah, it's the name of that portion of the, yeah, you can use payload. That's the name. Maybe token payload. What's important is that everything we saved in our generate token function that we put on the payload is going to show up there inside of that decoded token, plus the calculator expiration date and the date that it was issued at. Will there always be a decoded token, or will it only be generated if there is no error? Only if there is no error. Error means the library could not decode the token because it expired, because someone touched it and it's invalid. Anything that makes the token invalid is going to generate an error, okay? So we only get to that decoded token, right, in here, only if we successfully decoded the token and it is still valid. Cool? Now, if we have an endpoint that is restricted, and we get to the actual endpoint after we go through the restricted middleware, we know that we have that decoded token because we placed it there if the token was valid. Cool. So you could say that we're done, right? That's it. That's all we needed to learn today in order to work on the server. Questions? Your turn to go and implement this. Yes, no. So the main security issue for this would be that someone could get the token stolen and be used by someone else. Yes. And the security of this is higher when it comes to tokens because tokens are not depending on the domain like cookies are by default. So you can assemble you could make sure that your server only takes or accepts cookies as valid if they come from the same domain. In the case of the tokens, though, they can go across domains with no problems. They're designed that way on purpose. So yeah, there's always if someone gets to your computer and grabs that token, for the validity, for the time that the token is valid, they might have access in your behalf. And if you couple that with the fact that when you're logging out, you actually destroy the token on the client, but the server, unless you're keeping a whitelist or a blacklist of tokens, you can't really invalidate a token until it expires. So security concerns are valid on this, for sure. I guess the question is, why are we sending the token back? Remember that I said this is just for you to see the content of it? You're not going to send it back. Yeah, good point. I guess you missed it, right? The only reason we're doing this now, this makes no sense, sending it back, is because I wanted to show you on Postman what it looked like inside. Yeah, good eye, good catch. Yeah, it's easy to miss, right? It's easy to miss. So HTTP only versus local storage. HTTP only is for cookies. In the case of local storage, it doesn't really apply, right? HTTP only is for cookies to make sure that you can access the cookies from JavaScript. That's one way. The other one is whether you want to send credentials or not. When you configure your course on your server, whether you want to accept credentials from other domains. That's how you restrict to only yours. By default, it's not going to take, it's going to, when you configure a course by default, it's not going to accept cookies coming from other domains. So it's secure by default when it comes to cookies. And I don't know the answer of what's most secure or not. I just know that the industry as a whole uses both and they can't really agree on it. Some people say, use this. The other says, use this other thing. We just wanted you to understand that those are very commonly used methods of handling authentication and authorization, using tokens or using cookies. Kind of have a high level overview. Hopefully, your company is just going to pay for a service to handle this. So you're going to use some third-party authentication and authorization service out there. So you only have to care about the permissions that you give your users based on their identity. And then the identity is handled by someone else. For tokens, though, you can store them in different places. I mean, you can go as far as keeping sessions on the server, right? And then store the token inside of the session as part of the same way that we said rec.session.user, they would say rec.session.token and store the token in there. So the sessions still work and you could still invalidate the whole session, but then once the session is valid, you could grab the token and have the information about the authorization of the user as part of the token so that you don't have to hit the database once more to go and get that. So you can combine both. People do that all the time. Yeah. No simple answer here. Tabs versus spaces, double quotes, single quotes, 2 spaces, 4 spaces. Yeah. Hard choices. So do you want to treat tokens similar to cookies? Don't use the payload to store a lot of, yes. Anything that's going to travel over the network. Minimize the amount of information that travels over the network, always. Because of performance issues, and also because security issues, right? So the less information that's traveling throughout the internet, the better. So many layers. Remember when we talk about REST that we said layer systems? So many layers between the client and your server. Caching servers, just catching information. You have not authorized that people will save a copy of your data, but they might be service ISPs might be catching that content. And when a user requests for the same content, they might be just sending the same content they haven't cached before they hit your server. So be mindful of sending only the minimal data that you need. Would I mind going over adding a secret to the environment file? Of course not. We can do that for sure. Let me see if any other questions before I go and do that. Yeah, of course. I don't mind at all. So let's say that I wanted to have handle environments, right? So we go and create a brand new file. This is the first step, and do .env, right? This is going to hold the secret. And in here, let's make this just to follow the industry standard of having this be uppercase. We're going to do secret. And we could call it jot secret to make it a little more, clear what it is. And then you keep the secret in there, any secret that we want. So let's add another secret here. Give me a secret. Okay. So of course, if we're going to do that, we are going to need to install that little package there. So yarn add .env.env. So there is no secret, it's all a lie. Okay, that's the secret. We install the library, and what do? Well, we go very early in our application stage. In our case, we're gonna do that right before anything else, right here. We use the little library that we install. We require it, remember that? That's a little bit of plumbing here. Require.env, and then we call the config method in it, config, right there. What this config method is going to do from the library is going to go and read that .env file and grab all of those values that we have in there and put it inside a JavaScript object for us called process.env. So now every key value pair you see here is going to show up as process.env with this key and this value. So let's go use that. So instead of using the secret by default, we could say process.env.secret. Or if you don't have it, well, I'm going to use this. Save that. And now our application is going to be using that other secret instead. It's going to be using that from the .env file. How do I know? Well, we could send it back in one of these. Let's say when you do the login, again, don't do that, right? We're just doing that so that we can see the secret that we're using. All right, so 200, welcome, the token, and now let's see what secret we're using for this. Let's do a login, send that, and we have the secret, right? There is no secret, it's all a lie. This is coming now from the env file. We good? That works? So if we're building a static site, when you process your, well, static side, if it's static, it's not loading anything dynamic at all. It's just there. So there wouldn't be any secrets or anything like that. Right? This is for applications. So which portion of the code do we want to see? I say we see both. So show that. Top part, bottom part. Those are secrets though. You don't want to have those on a static site ever, because the code on any website is accessible by the browser, right? All of that has to be on environment variables. So you don't pre-calculate them no matter what. You have the code read those from the environment. If I'm getting the questions correctly. So all your code is going to say, if someone goes and see it, oh, I'm reading this from the process.env.judge_secret. That's it. So unless they can get into the server and inspect the process.env to find the value, they won't be able to do it. They won't get access to it. But then if they can do that, then you have bigger problems. They are already in the server. Can we randomize the process.env.secret? Yes, but then you would have to have the server that you use should support doing that, the hosting servers. Because remember, that's something that we can define, let's say on Heroku or Windows Azure. So if they have a way, like for instance, Heroku does that for you with the database connection string. The database connection string that they generate to connect to your Postgres database service, that changes over time. It's not static. You cannot copy it and keep it there. They give you an environment variable, and they take care of randomizing that and changing it every once in a while to keep your database access secure. So even if someone went to get a handle of your database string, a connection string, it's only going to be good for so long. I don't know how many times they refresh that during the day. So if you rely on environment variables, you need the server that is hosting your server needs to do that. You could, however, not rely on environment variables and just have it be something that you generate on your server randomly. So you will assign it a different one. I like this approach though. I like having that be an environment variable that is nowhere in code. There is no code anywhere that anybody can get a hold of. Not sure what's more secure though. Can give you a definite answer on that. So what if I wanted to check for a role for a user? Let's say that someone is logging in, and I want to check whether their role is the correct one. Let's say that to the let's say the users. Where's the users? Okay. What if I want to have that check for the TA role? And only TAs can see the list of users now. What would that function look like? What would that piece of that function, the check role, what would that look like? So what about doing this? Process.env that, secret equals randomize. The thing is that you cannot change that on the server in Heroku. Heroku is not going to let you just override their environment variables. You have to do that through the UI. Same with any other hosting provider. They're just not going to let you go and override their environment variables. That would be bad, that you could do that in code. So that's not going to work because you have to define it on their UI, through their UI, so that they can secure that. If it's your own server and you have some kind of function that does that, you have the access to doing that. Again, you're putting yourself in a tough spot, in my opinion. Yeah, security. Okay, so if we're doing this check role, can someone help me write this? We're gonna write it here to have it next to the endpoint. So I know it's gonna be a function. It's called check role. It's taking a role as the, oops, really? It's taking a role as the argument. What should it return in order for me to use this? What should this function return? Yeah, it should return a piece of middleware. Whatever comes out of this check role function must be middleware. So it's going to be a function with the homies. Okay, now we have that. So ultimately what we want to do is something like if, rec dot decoded jot that roles, right? Because we're going to assume that the user may have one or more roles, includes, or if it's only one role, it would be role, right? But let's say that we assume that eventually a user could have more than one role. So roles that include the role that we're looking for here. If that's the case, then we can call next, right? Because they have access. But if not, then we bounce them here. And the error code is going to be different from the one that we're using, right? Because in this case, we know who you are. We know you have a token. The token is valid. You just don't have the right role. So you're, instead of 401, it would be 403. I know who you are, but you have no access to this. All right? Of course, we're not adding the roles for a user to the decoded token, but we could though, right? When we're doing we're going, but we do it a couple of ways, right? Whether when we return a user, we could return the roles as part of the user, like we did before. It's probably the right way of doing it. You return the user with the roles. Or in here, I'm gonna fake that so that just because we don't have time to go and change the access code again, and you know how to do that already. So I'm gonna lie a little bit, and I'm going to assume that I already got that from the database, right? So when you get the payload, you got the user, I'm gonna assume that the user has the roles, and I'm just gonna add it here. Roles, it's gonna be an array, and student. So I'm gonna make every user a student now. I told you to take his staff. Guys, remember that? That was a good movie, though. There's a really emotional scene there when he says, "No father should have to bury his son." It's pretty powerful. All right, so let's go and visit the user now. We have that. Oh, I have this roles thing that it's not on the jot anymore. So let's go and fix that by generating a new jot that has the roles in it. And this error is because I'm not protecting for the case where I don't have the roles in there. So we're just going to generate a brand new jot, and that jot now should have the token. The token should include a payload that has a roles property in there, because that's new. That wasn't there before. So the old tokens don't have it. And this token should have it though. Didn't I just generate that? Save this. Let's see. Oh, this is on the register. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm doing this on the register. Should have been also on the login. So let's do that. Let's grab this and put that on the. Oh, this is my generate function. This is fine. I'm sending roles. Let me see what am I doing here wrong. Decoded jot roles. Okay, let's do the roles, and it includes this role. So on the generate token, we should be sending back a roles property as part of the payload with an array. Okay, login, generate token. Huh. Let's see, token dot. Weird. Login. Hey, this is not being refreshed. Why is this not refreshed? Slash API slash login. Any idea? The restricted middleware is adding the decoded token. Let's see. Well, that's fine. It's adding the decoded JWT. Next. I'm not sure why my server is not refreshing. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, that's a good point. I'm calling this before the restricted. Ah, good job. Yeah, why are we calling that before the restricted? First, we want to make sure that they're logged in. Then we want to check their role. So the order of middleware was probably doing away with us. So when we do that, okay, and then we copy this secret, I have hopes. This may work. You have, oh, you shall not. No, you have no power here. That's what we want to say. You have no power here. Be quiet, steward. Okay, you have no power here. That's what we want. And the reason is because we're checking for the TA role, but our user has the student role. Now, if we were checking for student, instead, save that. Of course, you want to lowercase that and all that before you do the comparison. Here we go. Now it's right. So, sorry, demos on the fly. That happens all the time. So Hamza identified that we want to call, and also Michael. Yeah. Cool. Questions there? Almost didn't work. And Kieran too. Everybody but me. And CJ. Oh man, everybody else. All right, so anyways, at the end of the day, what's important with this, not that I failed the demo miserably, but what's important is that you can have now a quick way to check the roles for a student, for a particular client coming in. And if your database supports having multiple roles, how can you do that? How can you have users that have more than one role and then have a role that can apply to different users? How can we do that? Yeah, a many-to-many relationship with a third table. So all you do is you go and say, hey, give me all of the roles for a particular user by using that third table, joining to that third table with the user ID and the role ID, and you grab that role. And then you add that to the token. So that collection of roles may be in the token. The cool thing is that now that you have that collection of roles there and you're checking for the roles in order to provide access, now you move into this kind of token right here, the access token, where you say, hey, I'm giving you, I'm handling both of my API, but if you're doing a third-party server, you get first the identity of the user, and then you assemble on your server this, right? Let's say that Google provides the identity and give you a user ID on Google. You can now save that user ID as part of your database and say, okay, when someone from Google with this Google ID, these are the roles that they're going to have. So you could go and check that, right? Now I'm providing access through that token too. Notice that we only check the database. We should only be checking the database when they log in the first time. But when the token comes in, if it's still valid, we're trusting that the roles in there, those are still the roles that the user have. And this is why we could probably make this 60 minutes. If we think that the roles for our user may be changing a lot, not the case most of the time, Then you make the token expire. So what happens is when that token expires and the client says, oh, I need to, send the refresh token now. The client sends the refresh token, and the server is going to take that refresh token and do another call to the database to get the roles again, to refresh the roles and give you a brand new access token that has the new roles for the user there. You can force it by just doing, a blacklist or a whitelist on your server so that you can log out that way. But this is common practice. Okay, this is a good first step to start working on authorization instead of just authentication. Working on the roles. Questions there? By the way, that's not always part of the lecture. It's just something that we do because we want to stay on authentication without seeing too much of authorization. It's a little confusing sometimes. All right, that's it. That's the lecture for today. If you don't have any more questions, I'll see you on Slack. Have a good one. I'm waiting to see. All right. See you on Slack.